Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello everybody and welcome to Future Hacker. I'm your host, Olinga Taeed, and today we are talking to Olinga Taeed. Olinga is the director of the world's leading think tank on the movement of value measurement, the not-for-profit Center for Citizenship, Enterprise and Governance, which has over 190,000 members. He's expert advisor and council member of the Chinese Ministry of Commerce's China E-commerce Blockchain Committee, which has oversight of 70% of the global market value at $103 trillion. He was the world's first professor in blockchain at BCU and is editor of the leading peer-reviewed Frontiers in Blockchain with 516 editors. His latest project is the Institute of Ideology in Code, home of total value. Hi Olinga, it's so great to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Very good, and thank you very much, Maria, for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
It's a truth honor to have you. And you know what? One of the things that is not on your bio is that, you're this super hardcore hands-on social worker, right? When he was telling me about all the social work he does, I couldn't avoid asking, Olinga, what happened to you? What happened in your life, right? So please, I'd love if you could share with our listeners the journey that you've been through.
Okay, thank you. With you, you're the first person to call me a social worker. That's good. For most people, they think social worker is like an insult. For me, it's an honor. It's an honor. So I guess, I was like many of your audience, your regular private sector guy. I was about 48, had around 9,000 staff, and I had 12 companies and companies on NASDAQ and then on London Stock Exchange and so on. And, the usual kind of pointless life, to be frank. And my daughter, whose name is Tigris, she had 2 breakdowns in 2008. And that changed the course of my life tremendously. That was what, 12 years ago or 13 years ago? And let me start with saying to you that I am the happiest I have ever been since the age of 11. And I'm 61. So I thank her for bringing me to this point of happiness. It wasn't in my life. So she had these breakdowns and she now hears voices 24/7. But I remember thinking at the time, Maria, I thought, wow, I have 9 houses. I have 7 cars. I have multiple divorces, and I failed to help her, to be there. I have contributed towards her crisis. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, I understand the value of money, which is, the dollar is the currency of financial value, but I don't understand the value of non-financial value, or the currency of non-financial value. Happiness and kindness and hope and generosity and love. So I sold businesses, most of them, and I went on a journey to try and understand my daughter, understand my own self, understand society better. And I set up in 2011, a few years later, I set up a not-for-profit, which is the center you mentioned, the Center for Citizenship, Enterprise and Governance. And in the intervening period, I had always done tons of mentoring of people before that. But in that intervening period, I did become, as you say, I moved far more towards a philanthropic, altruistic life. Did emergency fostering. For anyone who understands fostering, that's hardcore fostering. That's where you have no relationship with the person, but you got to keep them alive, And around 5-6 people a year, I tried to help them with mental health issues in particular is my interest. To be honest, it's this thing, the journey that I'm on, it's completely accidental, So I set up a center, a not-for-profit center, which was an academic center, because a couple of universities had given me a fancy professor title for no reason whatsoever, I have to be honest. At that time, I was impact investment advisor for a guy called David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister of the UK and so on something called Big Society, which is his kind of grand idea. I thought they wanted me to help get bankers to understand that there are other values other than money. because we were post-2008 financial crisis. And bankers were still paying themselves humongous bonuses. There was a guy in particular we were focused on at the time in government, a guy called Bob Diamond, who was CEO of Barclays, and he was an American guy. And he wanted to pay himself $18 billion straight after the crisis of the banking world that created the crisis in the world. And they were going, it's not right. But of course, Bob went, well, it's legal. My shareholders love me, and none of your business. I am paying myself $18 million. And so we thought what we need was another currency which people understand as quickly as the dollar. They can understand happiness, goodwill, and love, so that people like bankers and all of us can track ourselves easier and can transact it. I guess a challenge which they had set me, I remember the conversation, they went, oh, you're a professor now, aren't you? You're clever now, right? I went, yeah, I am so clever as of like the last few days. And they said, look, come up with a one number metric to do all this, represent all of this. And I remember, and I thought to myself, wow, even a joke professor like me knows enough to know that you can't bring all this to one number, And I went to see many academics, around 16 of them at a time, in the UK, I have to be honest, not abroad. And they all went, yes, have you read my book? And it takes 3 years to do a PhD on one organization to understand their value to society, and 2 years to peer review it, and then the publication. But at the time we had 165 million companies in Europe. We had 35 million in the US. We had 40 million in China. We had about 1 billion organizations in the world with NGOs. And how can you start metricizing the contribution of their impact that they have on society, etc.? Using traditional techniques, and there are many ways. There are about 3,000 different metrics out there in this area. And I was focused on data. And indeed, I recently gave a speech to central bankers, and I said, what will be the currency of 2030, the United Nations SDGs? What will be the currency of the world by then? And not a single one of them said money. They said, money maybe, but not really the focus. It's either data, or it's sentiment, or it's ideology. And so we are moving as a society to measure and transact different kinds of values. I'm interested in the measurement and the transaction of all values. And nowadays in particular, we talk about ideology. And recently, we've all heard of what's happened in Afghanistan. And that is a battle of not money, it's a battle of ideology. There's Americans who've gone in, and the British have gone in, the Russians have gone in, Islam is now predominant, the Chinese are now in, and these are all trying to promote their ideology. But they are using, nowadays, especially in China, they are using what we call fourth industrial revolution technologies of blockchain, of AI, of 5G, of Internet of Things, to actually measure and transact and monitor these values. So to make it clear to people, our understanding of this is different in the different areas of the world. Over in the States in particular, they think data belongs to corporates, and the corporates give you services for free, like Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, and they go, shut up. We just want your data to sell you more stuff, or to nudge you to a behavior in like vote in a particular way. And they go, this is very transparent. You give us the data, we give you the service for free, and we get our money back from selling more stuff to you. In Europe, we have a different view. They go, my data, my way, hence the whole GDPR thing. But frankly, it's not been a success, because we all know that all we do is hit cookie accept buttons 30 times a day, and no one reads any terms and conditions whatsoever. And the Chinese, as an example, they believe data belongs to government, and that their job is to look after their society, and they're not at all focused on individual rights. And so for them to look after 1.4 billion people in China and 72 BRI, One Belt, One Road countries, They go, we can't do this through individual rights, respect, and all that. We will use data to transact our values and to ensure that they are aligned to their values. In China, they have something called a social credit system, which of course is totally abhorrent to the West. They go, what? You're going to reward people based on how good they are citizens according to you? No, we have individual rights. And the Chinese go, well, we can't monitor individual rights. So we want to nudge to what we consider to be an ideal society. We'll monitor your behavior, we'll reward you for good behavior and punish you for bad behavior and give you benefits, and etc. So the journey where we are now is I spent 12 years looking at how we measure this stuff. I came up with an idea which happened to take off by luck and coincidence. And now I'm into the transaction of love and happiness and hope using things like blockchain. And then now ideology, because the thing about blockchain is not because I'm hell-bent on this. There are many people who are religious about blockchain. They think all bankers should be on nooses and so on. That is not me. But the thing about blockchain is that it can arbitrage any kind of asset, digital asset. That means anything which is of value. And money is of value, like Bitcoin, but so is happiness, and so is love, and so is kindness. And if you can digitize that, if you like, represent it through a token, and then you can arbitrage between money and love and happiness, etc.
Olinga, you covered so much. And so what I'd like to do next is to try to dig a little deeper into a bit of the things it was a wonderful background, by the way. So let's start by this challenge you were given, right? So, you were challenged to find out sort of a way to measure something that is absolutely subjective. I understand that everything can be quantifiable, but still it's very subjective, right? And you simply ended up created the God's metric. So basically you came up with this way to measure happiness, love, kindness, hope, right? So I have two questions for you. So the first is I don't even know if there's an easy way to answer that for like a podcast, but how you were able to quantify. I understand you talk to all those academics and they have all those books and things like that, but still, if there's any way you could make it a little more tangible for people like myself that doesn't really understand it. And then I'd love if you could share how you got this new system you created, like literally blessed by, the Vatican.
Okay, so before we go into how we do it, let me tell you that it doesn't matter how you do it. So often we're challenged in court because our metric has become a kind of de facto standard for procurement by governments around the world. Only in that area, I have to be honest, no other area. If you don't win a contract worth 3 billion because of my metric, of our metric, then certainly you're not very happy, are you? So we go in court about 5 times a year and we always defend and we never lose, but we always defend. Yep. The point I always say in court is it's not your honor. It is not that our metric is right. It's that we're consistently wrong. And the word is consistent. It means despite it being a subjective happiness, right, as you say, the way we do it is completely objective. There is no influence from us, and we use data. We measure sentiment, which is well measured already by people like Facebook and Google and Amazon measure sentiment all the time. If your listeners are unaware of how they do it, when you're on, let's say I'm sending a message to my mum, I say to her, oh, my knee hurt or my foot. I, for example, have just torn my Achilles tendon last week. So it reads my Gmail or my WhatsApp, looks at the word around Achilles heel. Is it bad, good, or indifferent? And then it says, what browser is he using? What's his location? Sell him a Achilles heel wrap or something, right? So they already use this with nothing to do with us extremely well. And the Chinese government do the same, but they read all your WeChats exactly the same way. So what we do is instead of enabling that information to help them to either sell you more stuff, we work on actually first to to nudge you into a better person. All right. So the technology behind it, the way we came up with it, where would I start if it was financial value? In the financial value, there's one number metric called the price earnings ratio, the PE ratio. It represents every single stock exchange in the world has a column saying PE ratio next to price and capitalization and yield, etc. It is universally accepted. And I went, what we need is a social earnings ratio, a one number metric, just like the PE ratio, which together with your social earnings ratio represents the total value of what we're talking about. So it's your financial and your non-financial value. At the time, no one was that interested. We automated it. I automated it. The university couldn't afford it. It was $100K. I spent my own money on that. And I didn't think much about it. But then I got a chance invitation to speak at the Vatican. And I thought it was a joke at first. I thought, because I wasn't, Maria, I was not a very nice person before all this, I remember my head of PR came to me once because there was 2 TV programs about me in the UK, many, many years ago. They were such a nasty guy, this guy Olinga is, captain of industry, look how he treats people. I remember I fired 80 CNN journalists on a Friday before Christmas. I didn't blink an eye, And I remember him saying to me, Olinga, can't you do something nice? So I can talk about you being a nice person. So it was an alien concept to me. But what we had done, and automating a data process system simply so that you could do it very quickly, nanoseconds, and measure and articulate it, is that we had made it all open source so anyone can use it, because it wasn't for profit. Money is, we had made all our monies in previous lives. And I called it social earnings ratio, the SE ratio, and then gave the speech. And it changed because the Vatican press called it the God metric, which anyone in marketing would know is like a gift from heaven that had arrived. Suddenly, I got back to London and everybody was interested. The God metric. In particular in the UK, they wanted us to use it in the government for something called the Social Value Act. In the UK, like most governments around the world at that time and now, you cannot do public sector procurement unless you bring a social value. So it's no longer cheapest price, because cheapest price, I could say I could build a railway instead of costing 2.8 billion, because I just go through every city and just wipe out villages. And they went, no, you need to create social value as well. So they used it in every government around the world. In India, there's something called a 2% CSR law, which is 2% of your gross profits must be spent on social value, and Indonesia the same, Mauritius the same, and then 5 different EU countries adopted it, and it took off from there. And in 2016, Maria, I thought I had done very well. I was super pleased with myself. My CEO at the time, who had come from Barclays Bank and was a big shot at Barclays, number 3, she said, "Are you very pleased with yourself?" She was in retirement. I said, "Yes." She said, "Wow, you have completely failed your mission. Amazing that you're pleased when someone has failed so badly as you, because nobody's interested. They only do it to win contracts. They're not because you change the values of society. Companies use your metric just because they want to win contracts. And to change the world," she said, "you need to become like a bank. You need to become transactional. You need to be able not just measure love, but to send it." And indeed, Maria, the story of all my divorces was I felt I loved them and they never felt I loved them. All right. So I had failed to transact my love. I had measured it in my heart, but they didn't receive it. I then, in 2016, we decided, since we already digitize sentiment and hope and happiness and love, etc., let's go and transact it. So we came across blockchain. And we went from being a ugly duckling of the social world, the social liberal innovation world. Everybody hated us in that world because we were saying, "I love you, $4.50. Oh my God, you actually monetize love, you moron. Do you not understand? You cannot." So we were very unpopular. But when we went into blockchain, we became like a beautiful swan. And people understood that we were actually doing something different. And so the projects that we now work on, are all to do with banking, for example, not just money and diamonds and land and so on, but also happiness and hope and kindness. Rewarding, for example, one of the big projects we have in the Middle East, in the UAE, is where they have a ministry of happiness and they have a ministry of tolerance. We don't have in America that, In America, the only currency is the dollar, isn't it? And indeed, I would always joke that if you were Mexican, a woman, or black, with money, you were all okay. But if you didn't have money, you were not okay. And so money is the currency, is the values set of America. But the world post-COVID in particular is changing, where we have projects like in the UAE where they want to bank, they want to reward behavior that creates happiness and tolerance in their country. Or in the city of Neom in Saudi Arabia, which is $500 billion was spent on 1 million people to create a new society. There they want to create a society not built on who's got the biggest amount of money, because money is not a challenge in Saudi Arabia, nor in Dubai. It is actually want to create a different society. So these are the kind of projects which we're involved in, large scale. We want to nudge society using very well adopted techniques now of data and sentiment measurement towards creating better ideologies.
I still have many questions for you. Let's wrap up this first episode and stay tuned, everybody. We're going to a second one with Olinga.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the second episode with Olinga Taeed for Future Hacker. So Olinga, let's recap really quick. So you were able to quantify non-financial values through this metric, and then you were able to transact it through blockchain, correct?
Correct.
So one question I have is, do you see blockchain as only a current way of doing it, and it will probably turn into something completely different? Or do you think that blockchain will be able to have an evolution itself, that it will make a little more sense? And the reason I'm asking you is if we're measuring positive social impacts, blockchain as is today is very bad for the environment. It's very energy consuming. Although I have heard of people that are chasing it to be more sustainable. I even heard of people that will be able to riding bikes, and the bikes would generate energy that will be used for mining and things like that. But still, I'd love to understand your thought that if it's only something that it's what's available today and what's allowed it to be happening, and maybe in the future it will be something completely different, or blockchain per se will be evaluating itself,
Okay, so I'm on one hand incredibly disappointed with blockchain, okay, because frankly, anyone who says to me there's a mainstream application of blockchain, then they are completely delusional. There is no mainstream application of blockchain right now. Bitcoin is just a rounding error in the financial world. So blockchain has yet to manifest a real reason. We do not have a Facebook of blockchain yet. We do not have a Google of blockchain. We have no reason when people go, aha, that's what it is. I believe the future of it is not by itself. I think at the moment, all the projects we're involved in, the exciting stuff is the crosses over with AI, Internet of Things, and 5G. It's a blended model of the future. And things like, I don't want an Alexa or a Siri that says, what's the weather in Brazil right now? I want to say, Alexa, buy me some blankets that are aligned to my values. No slave labor. I want it made of green products or partially green. I'm not very rich, Alexa. So get me something, source me something which actually is within my budget, but I still want to move towards being a better person in the ideologies that I represent. So I want a Siri, an AI, that doesn't say black and white things, but my father died, in February this year. I want to say, what would my father do in this situation? I want to look at his values set, not his money set. I truly believe this amalgamation of technologies can take us there. And I've given kind of speeches where I talk about even the Internet of Things. I talk about a racist doorbell, because in the Internet of Things, everything has intelligence. And the doorbell of the future at the moment If it rings, it can say, well, Olinga, I know you're a racist, and there's a black guy outside ringing the bell, so in fact, I won't even create a sound for you because I don't want to annoy you. And you go, what? If we don't bring these ethical interventions into these technologies, which can be creating a great society, I guess there are challenges, in all this. And I want things like blockchain to arbitrage those ideologies. And I believe the future, the projection that you guys talk about at 10, 20, 30 years, the future of the world will be transacting our values, not the value of things. And I truly believe that. So you say, does it not have value? They go, yeah, of course it has value. But because we have no way of measuring or transacting it, what can you do? You always go to default of money. And that's the world we've created. But it is exciting to know that these technologies that people far greater than myself have developed in the West Coast, in China, in Europe, etc., around the world, that using data and sentiment analysis to nudge us to different behavior can be used for good. And I believe that is the future of the world, and I believe it will happen.
And we are talking about the future, right? Olinga, when we met, we had our intro call. I asked you regarding, we were talking about all artificial intelligence and blockchain and things like that. And if you're trying to measure and transact, aren't you going to play with NFTs? And then you open this big smile. So you are trying to do something with NFTs, right? So can we talk about that, or is it still?
No. We can talk about it. Some things are sensitive, but some things, for example, we are doing as well as publicized that I'm an advisor to a listed company, London Stock Exchange. There's a petrochemical company called Wildcat. People go, what? Petrochemical company? You're supposed to be doing good? Did you say gas and oil? And the same thing people criticize me about working with China, and the fact is, you don't work with people and governments and organizations who are already great, right? You work with everyone because we can all do to nudging into different behaviors, right? And so the thing about NFT, the uniqueness about NFT is that it can identify a particular value set and to allow you to transact it. And it's not exchangeable. So for example, and if you've studied love, for example, my love for you, Maria, is not the same as your love for me, because my love is directional. I may love you, but you may not love me. So projects NFT are, for example, we allow the democratization of people to invest in oil and gas, to be able to choose like on a pin on a map, to put a pin on a map and say that square meter, if anything discovered on that square meter, I want a slice. I can only afford $5 to have that right. It's a square meter, but it's my square meter. And so we are doing a project for governments where GDP is now considered to be a, frankly, last Thursday concept, is no longer current, representing the values of each country. Because, how does Dubai, go, well, Dubai goes, well, Ministry of Happiness. I mean, GDP doesn't represent that. If people are happy or not. So they go, how can we represent that? So instead of per capita, money produced per capita, it should be the values, the money as well produced, but also the environment in let us say, a square meter, a cubic meter of that land, which is what happiness and what impact is created and what hope and money and oil and gas and resources, etc., etc. Actually, I think the future of NFTs is not necessarily just arts. It's actually to do with any kind of value sets that we want to particularly identify and transact. It came from lots of research we did, many, lots of academic papers on, for example, smiling. If I pass a homeless person and I smile to that homeless person, I made that person slightly happier because I've smiled, and that person's made me happy because their reaction. Now that's my particular love to that particular person. Somebody else will not react the same way. If I can capture that through an NFT, I say, this is my love to you, not just generally any love. And that's the difference between NFT and like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is any money, and it could be this Bitcoin or that Bitcoin. There's no difference between them. But NFT could be my particular love towards my particular daughter or towards this particular person or etc. So the stuff that we're doing is really early days because non-financial systems have not really developed at all very well. And many of the things we do, we pray and hope that the big boys take it because they have much greater ideas and resources than we do. But what we do is all our efforts are for large-scale projects. One of our biggest NFT-related projects is to do with something called Purple with Power, and that is disability. Do you know Facebook, Amazon, Google, they measure every single human being around the world, but not if they're disabled. And yet, around 20% of the world's population are disabled. 20% of the world population, but they're not even important enough to be measured by Facebook, etc., etc. And yet, the sentiments that disabled people create in us is so deep. You know, when you show love towards a disabled person, that is the society that I think we are post-COVID coming out of and wanting to be part of, where we're all inclusive. So we believe the idea of actually identifying the data set for disabled people and allowing them to transact that data can create for better shopping experiences. You know, we have something called a micro tip, where if someone says the way you treated me as a disabled person or the way I saw you treat that disabled person, if we cannot reward people who help the most unfortunate of our society, who really need our help, and my daughter is, disabled, and there are many people who are, we need to value that action and reward that action. And whether that means physically, like better discounts in retail, already kind of exist, but not to do with disability. If I look at, for example, in America, the gun lobby is very strong. And if you were a member of the NRA, the National Rifle Association in America, you used to get 20% discount. It didn't matter if you had a pulse, you got 20% discount. With Avis Rent-A-Cars, Continental Airlines, every airline, every rental car system in America, everyone. And usually, but people are shooting people in schoolyards and dying. And they go, yeah, but the money. And so, now the sentiment towards guns is changing. And so those brands have dropped that. The fact is, money has values. If I said to you, I love your blouse, Maria, and I'll send you $100,000 for it, you go, I will DHL it to you immediately. And I go, yeah, I'll pay you in KKK coins, Ku Klux Klan coins. And you don't need to know about cryptocurrency to understand what the hell I'm saying, do you? You go, whoa, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but I do not want Ku Klux Klan coins because it's an affront to my values, my ideology, and also I don't have Ku Klux Klan's spent in communities to spend it on. Who would accept that from me? What's the point of having that money? And we go, I pay you in black coin. They go, we'll give you 30% discount because they want to encourage that behavior. They want to encourage that community, that alignment. So values are now driving our society. And we're just interested in developing ecosystems that can do that.
You know what? We've been covering a lot about, ESG, but what we are talking about is, it seems to me like this really powered evolution of ESG and actually way of making everybody have more access and use their pockets somehow to vote for the causes that they believe, right? So that's super interesting. And, you mentioned how important it is, the power of procurement on board, because they're the ones defining again, talking about big pockets. But that works in a couple of governments that you mentioned. But when we're trying to make it really more spread, a lot still has to change because at least, and I don't know about the other countries, but at least Latin America, like the way that the whole compensation system for procurement works, everything needs to change, right? So if the person is getting compensated for how much he's saving his company, which is the traditional way of procurement, he will never be able to be applying those new rules of having a more corporate responsible player to choose, because it's usually more expensive than someone that is just damaging the environment. So it's challenging to end the cycle, but maybe maybe if it starts getting adopted by the government first and making it a policy, is the way to go, right?
Yes, so you're 100% right. Governments are generally adopted this because post 2008, no governments had any money post 2008. So they all came out with paradigms to get private sector to provide the services into the community through third sector agencies, through civil society that they no longer could afford. And in the UK, we called it big society, but in every kind of government had the same kind of policy framework. So government has to lead the way, but the private sector follows. And it does follow because old school procurement, you're absolutely right, cheapest is best, right? Cheapest is best. But they're now finding, that is why we're getting a wave. Suddenly, in a twinkle of an eye, every bank or every institution wants LGBTQ plus in that week. Go, what? Hang on. You're interested in what? And they go, yeah, because they understand that if they're not aligned to society, to their customers, if they're seen to be the bad guy, then people leave them. But as you say, it is very slow. We all, as we know, iPhones everywhere, and about 32 commit suicide every year in China making iPhones, And you tell that to anyone, and they go, yeah, but, it's so shiny. I love it, So it's about nudging society, It's about bringing systems that allows someone to say, I love an iPhone, but I'd like it to be a little more green and less slavery. And there's some people who can go right to the end and go, no, I want it completely green. And most of us are in that gray in between, where we need to be nudged. And the nudging techniques are very, very well rehearsed by Facebook and Amazon and by governments like China and others. Very well rehearsed. Okay, so let's nudge us into using this to our advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about all this investment China is making with all those researches regarding, no financial and nudging the population and figuring out the future currency, right? Which other countries you see following that road? Because what I feel and what we've been talking and discussing so much about the future is that for now, it's a competitive advantage, but soon it's an obligation, and whoever is winning the race is going, to technologies and anything else. So which other countries do you see that are on this track as well?
Yeah, so I think that the most of the focus is the Middle East and China, all right? And I'll explain why. The Middle East goes, wow, we are the richest countries in the world. The top 3% are in the Middle East, but we're not even the top 20 in the countries of the world with soft power. So people go, oh yeah, just shut up and make oil. Just shut up, just oil, okay? Make oil and go back into your box, okay? We're not interested in your value sets and history and all that nonsense. Just make oil, now go back home. So they say, well, we want to change a society, and they have the money to do it. They have the resources to do it. So Dubai, which they created, which is a miracle of, Las Vegas in the desert, they go, okay, look, we managed to create that, but, not good enough. They now want to put the first city on Mars by the year 2112. Yes, as a 500 billion UAE project. And they've launched a spaceship last year. And the NEOM project, 500 billion to create a population of 1 million, a new paradigm. They want to be recognized for their soft power, for their ability to transform society. The same way, China, for example, has got a digital currency. Now, 82% of countries in the world are their central banks are looking at digital currency, to have their own digital currency, UK included. And the reason is the currency that promotes the value sets of that country. So it's not a physical thing only that, China says, well, we got 73 countries and our own countries, so we want a currency that we can transact. The main thing, they want to reject a dollar because they don't want to adopt American value sets, and they don't want to adopt what dollar means in terms of the value sets. So I'm very hopeful that these 82 countries, they don't need another currency, do they? Why do they do it? Because they understand they can actually codify the ideology of their country to be British a Brexit coin, to be British in the currency that they have, so that it promotes to be British. It promotes the value sets of that country, and every country has those value sets, So this is why I think it's moving that way. It is moving that way. So these creations like Bitcoin, etc., you have to take your hats off to them, because they were the forerunner of the world that I'm talking about. I honestly can tell you, Maria, I feel love for all parts of society, because we're all trying now. Every part of society is now trying to create a better world. And COVID, just like the work I'm doing would not have happened if it post pre-2008, COVID was the watershed moment when the world went, wow, all this money, and look at this. I could have all this money and could still be dead. Perhaps there's a different way to live. Perhaps we can work from our home. Perhaps I don't need to go to the big city. Perhaps I actually like spending time with my family. I like to be with my children, etc., etc. So it changed our views. But if you can't have the ecosystems, and that's our job now, if you can't create those ecosystems, and it doesn't matter what ways to do to measure it, I don't care, The only point I said to you is that we were consistently wrong, So at least we were consistent. We showed that if you had a consistent method, then what can you do with it? You can create all these different things in our society. And so I'm sure the future world, the future growth, 2030, let's face it, I think the United Nations have more or less admitted SDGs 2030 is never going to happen. The MDGs was a disaster, didn't happen. But what they created was, 167 countries created 17 ideologies which they agreed on. That's a big achievement. 17 sets where they went, yeah, we all agree. And that is why now in Afghanistan, even Afghanistan, they're going, are you treating women again? I'm sorry, say that again? And they go, no, we respect women now, So they understand the world is no longer accepting certain terms of behavior, So I believe when we create the ecosystems, when they are rewarded for treating women better and on equal terms, and we take out inequality in the world, then the world will start changing, and the way we shop will start changing, and the way we behave, and the way we treat gender inequality and sexual equality, and so on. This is an exciting world, and we now have all the tools we need to do this. And it will be done way after I'm dead, thank God, perhaps.
That was such a perfect way to end our conversation today, Olinga. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing that out with our listeners. It was really a pleasure. If you have any final words, please, the final words is yours.
You're very kind. All I say to you is, I'm 61. It's not for me. It's for people who are listening to this, who can make this world happen. You have my full support.
Thank you so much.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.